The orbital city of Ocular Prime hung in the void like a jeweled parasite attached to the spine of the trade route. From the approach vectors, it looked magnificent. It was a spinning wheel of spun glass and localized gravity fields, glowing with the soft, inviting amber of hospitality sectors and the sharp rhythmic blue of docking bays. It promised luxury. It promised anonymity. It promised that anything could be bought if the credit chit was heavy enough. Inside the bowels of the station, far below the promenades where tourists sipped nebula mist cocktails, the air smelled of recycled ozone and unwashed bodies. This was the domain of the Remedial Integration Authority, a sanitary name for a cartel that specialized in human trafficking under the thin veneer of legal rehabilitation. Lyra Voss sat on a bench of cold, molded plasteel, her back pressed against a wall that hummed with the vibration of the station's main reactor. She was striking, even in the drab-gray jumpsuit of a prisoner. Her skin held the faint, iridescent sheen of her species, the kaolin, shifting from pale violet to deep indigo depending on the angle of the light, though in the harsh glare of the holding pen, she looked washed out. Her eyes were sharp, gold-flecked, and currently narrowed in a calculation that had nothing to do with despair and everything to do with structural engineering. She ran a finger along the base of her skull. The implant was there. She could feel the raised scar tissue. It was a standard-issue obedience lattice, a piece of neural hardware designed to dampen aggression and enforce compliance through induced serotonin crashes and motor function locks. It was also completely useless on her. Lyra had known since she was a child that her neurobiology was a statistical anomaly. The Kaolin government called it a recessive mutation. The human treaties called it a Class 4 divergence. Lyra just called it silence. When the guards pressed the control buttons on their tablets to pacify the prisoners, the other women in the cell slumped forward, their eyes glazing over in forced tranquility. Lyra just mimicked the motion, counting the seconds, waiting for the guards to look away. She was awake, she was angry, and she was dangerously lucid. The holding pen was crowded. There were 20 other women here, all Kaolin, all beautiful, and all terrified. The air was thick with the scent of fear, a chemical sharp tang that the ventilation system failed to scrub away. Lyra shifted, leaning toward the woman next to her, a petite botanist named Alara whose hands were shaking uncontrollably. "Stop that," Lyra whispered, her voice low but firm. "You are vibrating the bench. It is annoying." Ilara looked up, her eyes wide and wet. "They are going to sell us. Lyra, they say we are defective. They say the law does not apply. The law is a line drawn in the sand by men with guns." Lyra said, her tone dry. "And we are defective. That is the point. Look at the roster." Lyra nodded toward the holographic manifest flickering on the far wall. Just outside the energy barrier, it listed their crimes, or rather, their medical diagnoses. Subject 7 Alpha, diagnosis, chronic neural rejection. Subject 7 Beta, diagnosis, pathological noncompliance. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic fiction. The treaty between the Human Alliance and the Kaolin High Council strictly forbade the sale of sentient citizens. Slavery was outlawed. However, there was a clause in Article 42 regarding the disposal of biologically hazardous or mentally unrecoverable individuals. If a citizen was deemed medically defective and a danger to themselves, guardianship could be transferred to private entities for rehabilitation. The authority had turned a typo into an empire. They branded women defective, stripped their citizenship, and sold them to the highest bidder as indentured wards. Lyra looked around the room, really looking this time. She had spent the last 3 days listening to their stories in the dark cycles when the guards were playing cards. Ilara was not just a botanist. She had been leading a protest against terraforming pollution on the colony worlds. The tall woman in the corner with the silver hair was a whistleblower who had exposed corruption in the Hyperlane toll system. The woman weeping softly by the waste unit was a gene coder who had refused to work on military bioweapons. "This is not a random sweep," Lyra murmured to herself. "What did you say?" Ilara asked. Lyra shook her head. "We are not just merchandise. Ilara, we are problems. Every woman in this room is a political inconvenience to someone powerful. They did not just arrest us to make money. They arrested us to silence us. The auction is just a way to get paid for taking out the trash." The energy barrier buzzed and dissolved. 3 guards stepped in, wearing the heavy armored weave of the Authority security forces. They carried shock batons that crackled with blue electricity. "Up!" the lead guard barked. "Inspection is over. The buyers are seated." The women scrambled to their feet, fear spiking in the room like a fever. Lyra stood slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from her gray jumpsuit. She kept her head down, mimicking the posture of the broken, but her eyes were scanning the corridor beyond. 4 cameras, 2 automated turrets, a blast door that required a biometric key. Not today, she thought, but soon. They were herded down a long, sterile hallway that opened into the backstage area of the Grand Hall. The contrast was physically painful. The backstage was dark and chaotic, filled with technicians and handlers, while the stage beyond the heavy velvet curtains was awash in brilliant, theatrical light. Lyra could hear the hum of the crowd. It was a low, hungry sound. Through a gap in the curtains, she caught a glimpse of the auditorium. It was designed like an amphitheater, seats rising in tiered circles around a central podium. The buyers were a mix of human and alien elite. She saw the bloated faces of mining magnates, the sleek synthetic masks of syndicate bosses, and the cold bureaucratic uniforms of government officials who were likely there to buy quiet servants for off-record black sites. And then she saw him. He sat in a private booth near the front, separated from the common rabble by a shimmering force field of exclusivity. He was human, young by the standards of the wealthy geriatrics around him, perhaps in his early 30s. He wore a suit of dark, matte fabric that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it, tailored with a precision that spoke of old money. His hair was dark, brushed back from a face that was unreadable. He was not drinking. He was not talking to the sycophants hovering near his booth. He was just watching the stage with a stillness that made Lyra's skin prickle. "Who is that?" Ilara whispered, following Lyra's gaze. "I do not know," Lyra replied, "but he looks bored. That makes him dangerous." The music swelled, a bombastic orchestral piece that was meant to inspire awe but mostly sounded like a funeral march for dignity. The curtains parted. The guard shoved Lyra forward. "Move." The 20 women were marched out onto the circular stage. The lights were blinding. The heat was instantaneous. Lyra blinked, adjusting her vision, and felt the collective gaze of 500 predators wash over her. The auctioneer stepped onto a floating platform that hovered above them. He was a showman, a human with a smile that had been surgically widened and teeth that gleamed with diamond inlays. He wore a tuxedo of crushed purple velvet and held a microphone like a scepter. "Ladies and gentlemen, sentients of all systems," the auctioneer boomed, his voice amplified to rattle the rib cages of everyone in the room. "Welcome to the event of the cycle," the crowd roared their approval. "Tonight, we have a very special presentation," the auctioneer continued, gesturing to the women below with a flourish of his hand. "You know the law. You know the burden we take on. These poor souls before you are broken. Their minds are fractured. They cannot function in civil society. They are defiant. They are unstable. They are Defective. The word hung in the air, dripping with disdain. But, the auctioneer shouted, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Under the Rehabilitation Act, these units are available for private guardianship. They are strong. They are genetically pristine. They simply need a firm hand, a master who can provide the structure they so desperately lack. Laughter rippled through the room. Lyra clenched her jaw so hard her teeth ached. She stared straight ahead, refusing to cower. We are selling them as a single lot, the auctioneer announced. A bulk acquisition for the industrial buyer or the discerning collector who needs a full staff. 20 females. Kaelin biology, high endurance, and, of course, fully fitted with the obedience lattice. The bidding screen lit up above the stage. We will start the bidding at 5 million credits, the auctioneer cried. Do I hear 5 million for 20 exotic beauties? 5 million, shouted a voice from the third tier. 6 million, countered a reptilian alien in the front row. The numbers began to climb. 7 million, 8 million, 10 million. It was a sickening display of commerce. Lyra felt a wave of nausea. 10 million credits for 20 lives. That was 500,000 credits a person. The price of a mid-range shuttle. 15 million, a mining consortium representative yelled. Lyra looked back at the man in the private booth. He had not moved. He had not touched the bidding interface on the railing in front of him. He was just watching her. Their eyes met across the distance. His expression did not change. But for a second, Lyra thought she saw a flicker of something behind the mask of indifference. Not pity, not lust, calculation. 20 million credits going once, the auctioneer shouted, sweat glistening on his forehead. 20 million to the gentleman from the Helix Syndicate. 22 million, screamed a voice from the back. The frenzy was reaching its peak. The buyers were standing up, shouting over each other, fueled by the adrenaline of ownership. 30 million credits. The auctioneer's voice cracked with excitement. Do I hear 35? The room went silent as the number flashed on the screen. 30 million was a fortune. It was enough to buy a small moon. 30 million going once, the auctioneer said, raising his gavel. 30 million going twice. A tone chimed. It was a clear, resonant sound that cut through the noise of the auditorium like a knife. It was the sound of a priority override bid. All heads turned toward the private booth near the stage. The man in the dark suit had finally moved. He had pressed a single button on his console. The giant screen above the stage flickered and changed. The number 30 million vanished. In its place, a new number appeared. 100 million credits. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Even the ventilation fans seemed to stop. 100 million, the auctioneer whispered, forgetting to use his microphone. The man in the booth stood up. He adjusted his cuffs, his movements precise and calm. He did not look at the crowd. He looked only at the auctioneer. I believe the bid is entered, the man said. His voice was not loud, but the acoustics of the room carried it to every corner. It was a smooth baritone voice, utterly devoid of excitement. The auctioneer stammered, his composure shattering. Sir, that is an unprecedented sum. Are you certain? I am certain, the man said. And I am impatient. Close the auction. The auctioneer looked at the screen, then at the stunned faces of the other buyers, then back at the man. He raised his gavel, his hand trembling slightly. 100 million credits. Going once, going twice. He slammed the gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. Sold to Lord Kieran Vale of the Terran District. The crowd erupted. It was not a cheer. It was a mix of gasps, angry murmurs, and bewildered laughter. People were standing up, pointing, whispering frantically to their neighbors. Who pays 100 million for broken merchandise? Who is Kieran Vale? The auctioneer stepped forward, trying to regain control of the narrative, trying to milk the moment for one last drop of drama. He leaned into the microphone, a sneer curling his lip as he gestured to the women who now belonged to the human in the booth. He looked at the crowd, then at Kieran, and laughed a short, incredulous laugh. The auction sold defective alien women. The auctioneer paused, expecting the audience to join him in the mockery of the sheer waste of money. But the pause stretched too long. He looked at the check clearing on his datapad. He looked at the transfer confirmation that had just hit the Bank of the Authority. It was a complete acquisition, full legal transfer, irrevocable rights. The sneer faltered. He looked back at Kieran Vale, who was already walking toward the stage stairs, his security detail falling in behind him. The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The sentence hung unfinished in the air, completed only by the reality of the situation. One human bought them all. Lyra watched Kieran Vale descend the stairs. She felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. A man who paid that much money was not looking for servants. He was looking for something specific. And men with that kind of resourcefulness were usually monsters of a very rare breed. He is crazy, Ilara whispered, clutching Lyra's arm. Or he is a king. He is neither, Lyra said, her muscles tensing, readying for a fight that she knew she could not win but had to attempt. He is a problem. Kieran Vale reached the stage. He did not stop to speak to the auctioneer. He walked past the podium and stopped 3 meters from the group of women. Up close, he looked tired. There were fine lines around his eyes and a tension in his jaw. He tapped the comms unit in his ear. "Secure transport is at the loading dock," he said softly. "I want them moved immediately." The auctioneer hurried over, bowing low. "My Lord Vale, excellent choice. We can have them processed and sent to the holding cells for transfer within the hour. We just need to attach the transport shackles and—" "No shackles," Kieran said. The auctioneer blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "No shackles," Kieran repeated. He did not raise his voice. "And no holding cells. Take them to the medical suite on level 4. "The medical suite?" the auctioneer asked, confused. "But, sir, these are non-compliant units, without restraints. They are a flight risk. They are dangerous. Do I look like I am asking for your opinion?" Kieran asked. He turned his head slightly to look at the auctioneer. The movement was slow, predatory. "I purchased the lot. I purchased the right to determine how they are transported. Move them to the medical suite. Initialize full biometric access for them. They are to have command of their own room protocols." The auctioneer opened his mouth, closed it, and then nodded frantically. Of course, right away." The crowd was still buzzing, but the tone had shifted from shock to suspicion. Why would a buyer give autonomy to his purchase? Why medical care instead of containment? Lyra watched as Kieran signaled to his own private security team, men and women in unmarked charcoal armor, to take over from the authority guards. The transition was smooth, almost aggressive. The authority guards looked ready to argue, but Kieran's team was better armed and looked significantly more professional. "Let's go," one of Kieran's guards said to the women, not unkindly. "Please follow us." Lyra hesitated, then stepped forward. She caught Kieran's eye as she passed him. He did not smile. He just nodded, a microscopic acknowledgement of her existence. They were ushered off the stage, away from the blinding lights and into the cool shadows of the service corridors. The walk to level 4 was silent. The women were too confused to speak. They had braced themselves for chains and shock collars. Instead, they were walking freely, surrounded by guards who faced outward, toward the corridor, as if protecting them rather than containing them. The medical suite was sterile, white, and smelled of antiseptic. It was spacious, with 20 diagnostic beds, a private sanitation block, and a synthesizer for food and water. Kieran's guards took up positions outside the door. Kieran himself walked in last. He waited until the door hissed shut, sealing out the noise of the station. He stood by the entrance, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the 20 women staring at him with a mixture of hatred and confusion. "You are safe here," he said. "The walls are shielded. The audio is looped. No one is listening." Lyra stepped out from the group. She moved with the grace of a stalking cat, closing the distance between them until she was just outside striking range. She was taller than him by 2 inches, and she used it. "Safe?" She spat. The word was a weapon. "You think we are safe because you bought us? You think changing the brand of the cage makes us free?" Kieran looked at her. He did not flinch. "You are Lyra Voss," he said. "Structural engineer. Level 5 clearance before your citizenship was revoked." Lyra narrowed her eyes. "And you are a rich fool with too much money and a hero complex. Or maybe a pervert with a medical fetish. Which is it? Human?" Kieran let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. He reached into his jacket pocket. The women behind Lyra flinched, expecting a weapon. He pulled out a small, flat data drive and held it up. "I am the only thing standing between you and a vivisection table," Kieran said quietly. Lyra paused. "What did you say?" "The other bidders," Kieran said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The Helix Syndicate, the mining consortium. They did not want workers. They wanted parts, biological processors. Why do you think the authority labeled you defective? Why do you think they stripped your rights?" Lyra stared at him. "Because we are dissidents. Because you are immune." Kieran corrected. "You specifically, Lyra, and the others. They have traits, genetic quirks, anomalies. You are not just political prisoners. You are raw material for something else." He took a step closer to her. Lyra held her ground, refusing to back down, her chin high. "I did not buy you to own you," Kieran said. "I bought you because the moment that gavel came down, you became my property under intergalactic law. And that means the authority cannot touch you without declaring war on my family." Lyra searched his face. She looked for the lie. She was an engineer. She understood stress fractures and weak points. She looked for the crack in his facade. She saw exhaustion. She saw a deep, simmering anger that mirrored her own. But she did not see deception. "So what happens now?" Lyra asked, her voice losing some of its venom but none of its steel. "You keep us here as your pets? You parade us around as your charity cases?" "No," Kieran said. "Now, we figure out how to keep you alive long enough to get you off this station. Because we have about 6 hours before the authority realizes that I am not going to play by their rules." He turned and tapped the control panel on the wall. A holographic schematic of the station appeared. "And just so you know," he added, glancing back at her with a dry look, "you cost me a fortune. Try not to get killed immediately. It would be a poor return on investment." Lyra stared at him. For the first time in months. The buzzing silence in her head felt less like isolation and more like clarity. She did not trust him. Not yet. But she believed him. Before she could respond, the comms unit in Kieran's ear chirped. He tapped it, his expression darkening. "Talk to me," he said. A voice filtered through, audible only to him. but Lyra saw his eyes narrow. "We have a problem, sir," the voice said. "We are tracking a signal spike from the authority's central command. It's not local. It's an encrypted burst transmission." "Directed at whom?" Kieran asked. "Directed at the station security chief," the voice replied. "But the origin point isn't the authority HQ. The signal is coming from the Terran Senate private relay, and it's marked with a Red 1 priority clearance." Kieran's face went still. A Red 1 clearance was state level. It meant the government was involved. It meant the authority wasn't just a cartel, it was a subcontractor. He looked up at Lyra, and the mask of the bored billionaire vanished completely, replaced by the sharp, hard look of a soldier who just realized the battlefield was bigger than he thought. "Change of plans," Kieran said to the room. "We don't have 6 hours." Lyra stepped closer, her curiosity finally outweighing her hostility. "Who is calling them?" Kieran looked at the schematic, then back at the women he had just purchased. "Someone who doesn't want you to leave," he said. "Someone very high up." He walked to the door and locked it manually. "Welcome to the Resistance, ladies," he said. "Try to keep up." Lyra looked at the locked door, then at the women who were looking to her for guidance. She took a deep breath. She looked at Kieran Vale. "If we die," she said, "I am going to haunt you." Kieran looked at her, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward in the ghost of a smile. "Get in line," he said. The lights in the corridor outside flickered and turned red. The station was going into lockdown. The auction was over. The war had just begun. The medical suite on level 4 was no longer a sanctuary. It was a bunker. The red emergency lights pulsed in a slow, rhythmic beat that made the shadows stretch and contract like breathing lungs. Outside the heavy blast doors, the muffled sounds of boots on metal grating grew louder. Kieran Vale stood by the diagnostic console, his fingers flying across the haptic interface. He was trying to build a digital firewall around their location, but the station's mainframe was chewing through his encryptions with terrifying speed. "You are not just a rich tourist," Lyra said. She was leaning against a supply crate, her arms crossed. The other women were huddled behind her, watching the human with a mixture of fear and fascination. Kieran did not look up. "I never said I was. You moved money like a banker, but you locked doors like a spy," Lyra observed. "Who are you really?" "Kieran Vale. And do not tell me you are a philanthropist. I will know you are lying, and I will break your nose." Kieran paused. He straightened up and turned to face them. The exhaustion was still there, etched into the lines around his eyes, but the mask of the bored aristocrat was gone. In its place was something colder, sharper. "I was an analyst for naval intelligence," Kieran said. His voice was steady. "Sector 7. My job was to track illegal cargo moving through the fringe systems. Weapons, narcotics, banned tech. And," Lyra pressed, "and 6 months ago, I found a data stream that did not make sense," Kieran continued. "A joint project between a rogue faction of the Human Alliance and the Kalan Ministry of Defense. They were moving biological assets, not soldiers, civilians. They were labeling them as defective to bypass the sentient rights treaties." The room went silent. The women exchanged glances. "They called it the Reclamation Protocol," Kieran said. "But that is a lie. It is a trafficking ring. They are taking people who are inconvenient, people who ask 2 questions, people who refuse to conform, people whose biology rejects their control methods, and they are disappearing them." "So you decided to become a hero?" Lyra asked, her tone skeptical. "You cashed out your inheritance to buy a clear conscience." "I decided to finish the job," Kieran corrected her. "I reported my findings to my superiors. 2 days later, my clearance was revoked, and my apartment was firebombed. My mentor was found dead in a shuttle accident. I realized that the rot goes all the way to the top. I could not stop the program from the inside, so I decided to disrupt the supply chain. He gestured to the room. You are the supply chain. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. She was assessing him, weighing his words against the tension in his shoulders and the grit in his voice. He was telling the truth, or at least, a version of it that he believed. Fine, Lyra said. She pushed off the crate. If we are the supply chain, then we are also the weapon. She turned to the other women. Her voice shifted, becoming authoritative and sharp. She was no longer a prisoner. She was an engineer taking stock of her materials. Listen to me, Lyra commanded. The human says we are defective. The authority says we are broken. I say they are wrong. We are here because we failed to be obedient. That means we have wills of iron. I want to know why you were taken, not the lie on your sheet, the truth. A tall woman with violet skin and silver markings stepped forward. Her name was Tala. I was a linguistic archivist, Tala said softly. They said I had a processing disorder. The truth is that I deciphered a dead dialect that the High Council banned 300 years ago. It contains the original texts of the free wills. Lyra nodded. You can read code patterns then? Better than a machine, Tala said. Next, Lyra barked. A small, round-faced woman named Jessa raised her hand. I was a structural mechanic for the orbital docks. They fired me for negligence. I was actually sabotaging the sensory arrays on the patrol drones so smugglers could get food to the blockade runners. You know the station schematics? Lyra asked. I know every bolt, Jessa grinned. One by one, they spoke. The room transformed. It was no longer a gathering of victims, it was a drafting of specialists. There was a biochemist whose blood produced a natural toxin that neutralized sedative gases. Her defect was an immunity to anesthesia. There was a pilot who had been grounded for reckless flying because her reflexes were too fast for the standard neural interface. There was a sensory empath who could hear the electrical hum of a lie. Lyra turned back to Kieran. You bought a set of broken dolls, Lyra said, a fierce pride burning in her eyes. But it turns out you actually bought a strike team. Kieran looked at the women, and for the first time, a genuine look of respect crossed his face. Good, he said, because we are going to need every bit of that. He walked over to a large duffel bag he had brought in with him and unzipped it. He began pulling out items, ration bars, basic medical kits, and a pile of nondescript gray tunics. I managed to smuggle these in, Kieran said, holding up a tunic. It is not high fashion, but it is better than the prison jumpsuits. It is thermal weave. It will hide your heat signatures from the drones. He tossed one to Lyra. She caught it and held it up. It was a shapeless, drab garment that looked like it had been designed for a potato. You have terrible taste, Lyra said. Kieran blinked. I am trying to keep you alive, not dress you for a gala. It is ugly. Ilara chimed in from the back. If I am going to die in a shootout, I would prefer not to look like a sack of grain. Kieran looked exasperated. He held up a ration bar. It is high-calorie protein. It tastes like chalk, but it will keep you running for 24 hours. We are Kalen, Tala said, crossing her arms. Our metabolism requires copper-based enzymes. If we eat that, we will vomit. Loudly, Kieran lowered the bar, looking from Tala to the bar and back again. He looked genuinely lost. He was a man prepared for tactical extraction, for hacking, for combat. He was not prepared for the logistical nightmare of 20 alien physiologies and opinions. I did not know that, Kieran admitted. He sounded humbled. I apologize. He dropped the bar back into the bag. He looked at them, really looked at them, realizing that his savior complex had blinded him to the basic reality of who they were. He had seen them as cargo to be saved, not people with specific needs. Tell me what you need, Kieran said quietly. Lyra stepped closer. We need water. We need salt tablets if you have them. And we need weapons. I have 3 stun pulse pistols, Kieran said. That is 3 more than we had yesterday, Lyra said. Give them to Jessa, Tala, and myself. As the women began to change into the thermal tunics, grumbling about the fit but accepting the utility, Lyra moved to the medical terminal in the corner. She needed to know exactly what the authority had put in their bodies. She placed her hand on the scanner. The screen flared to life, scrolling through her biometric data. She saw the flag for the obedience lattice. She saw the notes on her resistance. And then, buried deep in the subdirectory of her file, she saw a data scar. It was a jagged line of code that looked like a glitch, but to an engineer, it looked like a sloppy deletion. She tapped the screen, expanding the file. The scar opened up, revealing a destination log that had been scrubbed. Destination, the Halcyon Array. Lyra frowned. The name meant nothing to her, but the coordinates attached to it were deep in the gas giant sector of the outer rim. Kieran, she called out. He was at her side in an instant. What is it? Have you heard of the Halcyon Array? Kieran stiffened. The color drained from his face. Where did you see that name? On my transfer orders, Lyra said. Before you outbid them. This is where I was going. Kieran stared at the screen. The Halcyon Array is a ghost story, he said softly. Intelligence mentions it in whispers. It is supposed to be a research station for deep space telemetry. But if they are sending prisoners there, it is not for telemetry. Lyra finished. Kieran looked at her. The tension between them shifted. It was no longer just a partnership of necessity. It was shared danger. The air in the room felt suddenly very thin. He leaned in to look closer at the data, his shoulder brushing against hers. Lyra did not pull away. She could smell him, the scent of clean fabric, old paper, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. It was a grounding scent. She turned her head. His face was inches from hers. He was looking at the screen, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the code. He was handsome, she realized with a jolt of annoyance, not in the polished way of the models on the billboards, but in a way that suggested durability. Kieran turned to look at her, sensing her gaze. They were close, dangerously close, the kind of proximity where the air becomes charged with static. Lyra felt a pull, a magnetic snap of attraction that had nothing to do with logic. She wanted to reach out, to grab the lapel of his jacket, to test the reality of him. She leaned in, just a fraction, a test. Kieran's eyes dilated. He did not move away, but his hands remained firmly at his sides. He held her gaze, his expression raw and open, but he did not cross the line. He did not presume. He waited. Lyra watched him. She saw the desire, but she also saw the iron wall of his discipline. He would not touch her unless she asked. He would not take what he had bought. She exhaled, a slow breath that broke the moment. She pulled back, stepping away to establish the boundary. You are decent, Lyra said softly. It is very confusing. Kieran let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. I try my best. A heavy thud echoed through the room. The main blast doors shook. Open up! A voice boomed from the outside, amplified by a megaphone. This is Station Authority. We have a warrant for the seizure of contraband biological assets. Kieran checked his wrist comp. They are early. They are not asking. Jessa shouted from the back. They are cutting the lock. Sparks began to shower from the top of the doorframe as a laser cutter bit into the metal. Jessa, Kieran shouted. The ventilation grid. You said you know the layout. Jessa was already scrambling up a shelving unit to a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. It connects to the main artery, but it is tight, and it is vertical for 50 meters. Go, Kieran ordered. He pulled a stun pistol from his belt and tossed it to Lyra. She caught it, feeling the reassuring weight of the grip. Get them up there, Kieran said to Lyra. I will buy you time. No, Lyra said. She racked the slide of the pistol. We buy us time. She turned to the women. Move, into the hatch. Ilara, Tala, go first. Pull the others up. The laser cutter finished its arc. The heavy door groaned and fell inward with a deafening crash. Smoke billowed into the room. Through the haze, 4 armored enforcers stormed in, weapons raised. Stop, the lead enforcer shouted. Lyra did not hesitate. She fired. The blue ring of stun energy hit the lead enforcer in the chest plate, sending him stumbling back into his squad mates. Go! Lyra screamed. Kieran was beside her, firing with his own weapon, his shots precise and controlled. He hit the second guard in the visor, dropping him instantly. The room dissolved into chaos. The women were scrambling up the shelving unit, disappearing into the ceiling hatch one by one. Jessa was at the top, hauling them up with surprising strength. Kieran and Lyra held the doorway. The authority guards were regrouping, taking cover behind the fallen door, returning fire with suppression rounds that pinged harmlessly off the reinforced walls. For now, we have to move, Kieran grunted, firing 2 shots to keep the heads of the guards down. You go, Lyra said. I will cover the rear. I am not leaving you, Kieran shouted, breaking his calm demeanor. Then climb, you idiot, Lyra yelled back. She grabbed his jacket and shoved him toward the shelves. Kieran stumbled back, looked at her wild, fierce face, and nodded. He scrambled up the shelves. Jessa grabbed his arm and hauled him into the dark maw of the ventilation shaft. Lyra fired 3 more shots, blinding the doorway with smoke and energy, then turned and leaped. She caught the edge of the hatch. Kieran and Jessa grabbed her wrists and pulled. She slid into the duct just as a plasma bolt scorched the metal where her head had been a second before. Jessa slammed the hatch shut and engaged the manual lock. They were in darkness. The air was stale and smelled of grease and dust. Move, Jessa whispered. They will have drones in the vents in 2 minutes. The escape was a nightmare of claustrophobia and exertion. They crawled single file through the narrow steel intestines of the station. The metal bit into their knees. The heat was stifling. They are tracking us, Tala hissed from the middle of the line. I can hear the frequency of their scanners. They are sealing the sectors ahead. Jessa, Lyra called out. Where are we? Sector 9, Jessa replied. Above the neon promenade. We need to get to the zero-gravity service tunnels on the exterior ring. It is the only way to the docks that does not have pressure sensors. Left, Jessa commanded. They spilled out of a vent and onto a maintenance catwalk high above the main promenade. Below them, the city was alive. Holographic advertisements danced in the air, selling pleasure and forgetfulness. The people down there had no idea that 20 feet above their heads, a revolution was crawling on its belly. There, a shout from below. A security drone rose from the crowd, its red eye fixing on them. It let out a shrill siren scream. Run! Kieran shouted. They sprinted along the catwalk. The drone fired a warning shot that sizzled past Lyra's ear. Ilara! Lyra shouted. The fire suppression system. Ilara, the botanist, looked at the piping running along the wall. She saw the yellow valve marked chemical retardant. She did not hesitate. She grabbed a heavy wrench from a wall mount and swung it with all her might. The valve sheared off. A torrent of thick, white chemical foam exploded outward, spraying directly into the path of the pursuing drone. The foam coated the drone's sensors and intakes. The machine sputtered, spun wildly out of control, and crashed into a neon billboard advertising synthetic whiskey. "Nice aim," Kieran yelled. They reached the end of the catwalk. A round airlock door marked 0G environmental maintenance blocked their path. Kieran pulled a decoding tool from his belt and jammed it into the port. "Come on. Come on." The light turned green. The door hissed open. The world tilted. As they stepped through, gravity vanished. They floated into a vast cylindrical tunnel that ran the length of the station's spine. It was silent here. Dust motes danced in the air like diamonds. "Push off," Lyra ordered. "Link arms. Do not get separated." They kicked off the wall, soaring through the center of the tunnel. It was disorienting but exhilarating. They were flying. The women, who had been huddled and fearful an hour ago, were now laughing with the sheer adrenaline of survival. But the authority was not done. At the far end of the tunnel, the blast doors began to close. They were trying to trap them inside. "Faster!" Kieran shouted. He used the thrusters on his boots, small, concealed jets, to propel himself forward, grabbing the two slowest women and towing them. Lyra saw the gap narrowing. 10 feet, 5 feet. "Jessa!" Lyra yelled. "The hydraulic line!" Jessa understood instantly. As they flew past a control box on the wall, Jessa lashed out with her foot, kicking the exposed hydraulic coupling. Fluid sprayed out in a glistening sphere of golden droplets. The pressure in the door mechanism dropped. The heavy blast doors shuddered and groaned, stalling just 3 feet from closing. They shot through the gap, one by one, tumbling out into the docking bay antechamber where gravity reasserted itself with a bone-jarring slam. They hit the floor, gasping, bruised but alive. "We are here," Kieran wheezed, helping Tala to her feet. "Docking bay 94. He ran to the bay controls and punched in a code. The armored shutters rolled up, revealing the void of space and a sleek, silver ship resting on the maglev pad. It was not a warship. It was not a smuggler's crate. It was a diplomatic courier vessel, painted in the brilliant white and blue of the Interstellar Humanitarian Aid Corps. The name painted on the hull was the Samaritan. "Wait," Lyra said, staring at the ship. "That is a diplomatic vessel." "It is," Kieran said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It has Class A immunity. Local law enforcement cannot board it without a warrant signed by the High Council." "You registered your ship as an aid vessel?" Lyra asked. "Technically," Kieran said, walking up the ramp. "I registered a charity called the Foundation for Wayward Travelers 5 years ago. This is its flagship." "You are insane," Lyra said, but she was smiling. They boarded the ship. The interior was compact but luxurious compared to the holding cells. Kieran moved instantly to the cockpit, his fingers flying over the pre-flight sequence. "Strap in," he shouted over the intercom. "We are leaving before they decide to blow the docking clamps." The ship hummed to life. The engines whined, a high-pitched scream that vibrated through the hull. Outside the viewport, Lyra saw the Authority security forces bursting into the hangar bay. They raised their weapons, but they did not fire. They saw the diplomatic markings. They froze. Kieran punched the throttle. The Samaritan shot forward, shattering the magnetic field of the docking bay and blasting out into the star-strewn darkness. They were free. An hour later, the ship was drifting in the silent currents of deep space, hidden in the shadow of a passing asteroid belt. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a heavy, aching fatigue. Lyra found Kieran in the cockpit. He was staring at a small holographic projector on the dashboard. "Are we clear?" Lyra asked softly. "We are clear," Kieran said. "For now." He did not turn around. He pressed a button on the projector. A blue light flickered, and the image of an older man appeared. He had kind eyes and a weary face. He wore the uniform of a university dean. "Kieran," the hologram said. Its voice was tinny and distorted. "If you are seeing this, then I am dead. And you have found the project." Lyra stepped closer. "Who is that?" "My mentor," Kieran whispered. "Professor Holloway." The hologram continued. "I tried to bring the evidence to the Senate, but they blocked me. Kieran, the rot is deeper than we thought. The reclamation protocol is not just a military operation. It is being sanctioned by the Interstellar Ethics Council." Lyra gasped. The Ethics Council was the highest moral authority in the galaxy. They were the ones who wrote the treaties. They were the guardians of sentient rights. "There is a name," the hologram said. "A contact. Someone inside the council who is trying to stop it. Find them. Trust no one else. The key is in the Halcyon Array. You must go there. You must—" The hologram flickered and died. Kieran sat in silence, the blue light fading from his face. "The Ethics Council," Lyra said, her voice hollow. "The people who are supposed to protect us are the ones selling us." Kieran turned to look at her. His eyes were dark, filled with a new, terrible purpose. "They are not just selling you. Lyra," he said, "they are erasing you." He stood up and looked out at the stars. "We are not running anymore," Kieran said. "We are going to the Halcyon Array, and we are going to burn it to the ground." Lyra stood beside him. She looked at the reflection of the 20 women in the glass of the cockpit, sleeping in the passenger cabin behind them. "No," Lyra said. "We are not just going to burn it. We are going to broadcast the fire so the whole universe can see." She reached out and took his hand. This time, she did not pull away. "Plot a course." Kieran Vale. Kieran looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. He nodded. "Course plotted." The ship turned, its engines flaring bright against the dark, heading toward the outer rim, toward the storm, and toward the truth. The planet Xylos hung in the spiral arm of the galaxy like a rebellious teenager refusing to tidy their room. It was a world of perpetual twilight, illuminated not by a sun, but by the neon glow of 1,000 vertical cities built into the skeletons of crashed colony ships. It was a haven for glitch artists, code breakers, and anyone who found the sanitized order of the core systems allergic to their existence. To the crew of the Samaritan, it looked like heaven. Kieran Vale set the ship down on a landing pad that was technically a repurposed heat shield from a derelict destroyer. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan that vibrated through the hull. "We are down," Kieran announced over the comms. "Welcome to the drift. Keep your heads down and your comms encrypted. This place has no laws, but it has plenty of ears." The main airlock hissed open, and the smell of Xylos drifted in. It smelled of ozone, frying street food, and cheap coolant. Lyra Voss stood at the top of the ramp, taking a deep breath. Behind her, the tension that had gripped the 20 women since the auction began to unspool. They were still fugitives, but for the first time in weeks, they were not cargo. "I like it," Lyra said, surveying the chaotic skyline where holographic graffiti danced across the clouds. "It looks like a headache." "It is a headache," Kieran said, walking up beside her. He had traded his tailored suit for a worn leather jacket and tactical trousers, trying to blend in, but he still stood with the rigid posture of a military officer. "It is also the only place in the sector where we can buy illegal processor cores without flagging a government audit." Lyra glanced at him sideways. You look like a narc. Kieran? Excuse me? Kieran asked, frowning. You look like an undercover cop trying to look like a criminal. Lyra explained. You are standing too straight. Slouch a little. You are supposed to be a rogue, not a statue. Behind them, Ilara and Jessa giggled. He is trying. Lyra, Jessa teased, look at his boots. He actually scuffed them on purpose before we left the ship. It is adorable. Kieran looked down at his boots, then back at the women. I am regretting saving all of you. No, you are not, Tala said, walking past him and patting him on the shoulder. You love us. We are the most excitement you have had in a decade. Now, where is the credit exchange? I need to buy a data pad that does not track my location every time I sneeze. They moved into the city as a group, a strange, eclectic phalanx. The locals, a mix of cybernetically enhanced humans and multi-limbed aliens, gave them a wide berth. It was not because they looked dangerous, but because they moved with a synchronized purpose that screamed crew. Kieran had arranged for safe housing in a converted warehouse district. It was rough, industrial, and filled with the humming noise of server farms cooling in the basement. But it was private. For the next 2 days, the warehouse became a base of operations. It also became a home. The dynamic shifted rapidly. Kieran Vale, the man who had purchased them, found himself demoted from savior to logistics manager. The women took over the space. Jessa rewired the security grid because she found Kieran's encryption childish. Ilara set up a hydroponic garden in the shower stall using stolen UV lamps. Tala reorganized the inventory system and scolded Kieran for buying low-grade coffee. Lyra watched it all with a sense of grim satisfaction. They were reclaiming their agency in small, domestic rebellions. She found Kieran on the roof terrace on the second night. He was leaning against the railing, watching the neon rain fall on the city below. He held a cup of the terrible coffee in his hands. You are brooding, Lyra said, stepping out of the shadows. I am thinking, Kieran corrected. Same thing for men like you, Lyra said. She moved to stand beside him. She was wearing a tank top and cargo pants she had bartered for in the market. Her arms were bare, revealing the faint geometric scars of the bioscanners from the prison. How are they? Kieran asked, nodding toward the door leading downstairs. They are good, Lyra said. Jessa is teaching the others how to bypass a standard maglock. There is a lot of laughter. It is a good sound. Kieran nodded slowly. It is. Lyra turned to face him. She rested her hip against the railing. You are letting them lead. I noticed. You step back when decisions are made. You ask Tala for inventory counts instead of demanding them. It is not my revolution. Lyra, Kieran said quietly. I am just the driver. No, Lyra said firm. Do not do that. Do not play the martyr. You are not just the driver. You are the one who burned his life down to get us out. That makes you one of us. Whether you like it or not, you are part of the Defective Club now. Kieran looked at her. His eyes were dark, reflecting the purple lights of the city. I have never belonged to a club before. It shows, Lyra said. You are awkward, but you are learning. She reached out and took the cup from his hand. She took a sip, grimaced, and handed it back. That is disgusting, she said. It is all we have, Kieran said, a small smile touching his lips. We need to meet your contact, Lyra said, her tone shifting to business. The journalist, Zex, Kieran said. He is meeting us at the Ruby Circuit in an hour. He is unique. Unique was an understatement. The Ruby Circuit was a club that catered to the sensory overload crowd. The music was not just sound. It was a physical vibration that rattled the teeth. The light show was designed to induce mild hallucinations. In a private booth at the back, Zex was waiting. Zex was a Varaxian, a species that resembled a large bipedal crustacean with 4 arms and eyes on independent stalks. He was wearing a smoking jacket made of shimmering synthetic silk and was currently juggling 3 different drinks. "Kieran!" Zex boomed, his voice a series of clicks and whistles translated by the synthesizer around his neck into a smooth, radio host baritone. "You look terrible. Have you been sleeping in a garbage compactor?" "Zex," Kieran said, sliding into the booth. "Good to see you too." "And who is this?" Zex asked, 2 of his eyes swiveling to focus on Lyra. "The mystery woman? The face that launched a 100 million credit lawsuit?" "This is Lyra Voss," Kieran said. Lyra sat down, unimpressed by the theatrics. "I hear you are the best investigative journalist in the sector, or at least the loudest." Zex laughed, a sound like clattering plates. "Loudest is best. My dear, truth is no good if nobody hears it. Kieran tells me you have a story that will topple the council." "We have evidence," Lyra said. She pulled a data chip from her pocket and placed it on the table. Zex picked it up with a claw, examining it. "What do you want?" Zex asked, his tone suddenly serious. "We want a broadcast," Kieran said. "System-wide, uncensored. We need to bypass the authorities' media filters." "That is expensive," Zex said, "and dangerous. If I run this, I will have to move to a moon where the atmosphere is mostly methane just to hide." "You will do it," Lyra said calmly. "Why?" Zex asked. "Because you are bored," Lyra said. "I read your column. You used to write about corruption and war crimes. Now you write about celebrity scandals and black market fashion. You are starving for something real." "This is real." Zex looked at her. All 4 of his eyes focused on her face. He tapped the chip on the table. "I want exclusive rights," Zex said. "I want to be embedded with your crew. I want to film the ugly parts. No editing. Deal," Kieran said. Lyra nodded. "But you follow my orders. If you get in the way of a firefight, I will leave you behind." Zex grinned, clicking his mandibles. "I like her, Kieran. She is terrifying." Back at the warehouse, the atmosphere had shifted from domestic to operational. Lyra plugged the stolen authority drive into the main terminal. She had Zex's decoding algorithms now, which acted like a sledgehammer to the digital walls the cartel had erected. The screen flooded with data. It was a waterfall of names, dates, and medical logs. Lyra sat in the glow of the monitor, her eyes scanning the text faster than a human could follow. Kieran stood behind her, watching. "Look at this," Lyra said, her voice tight. She highlighted a section of the legal code attached to the prisoner manifests. "Classification 9 Zulu," she read. "Designated defective. Legal definition: any biological entity displaying non-standard neural topology that resists state-sanctioned harmonization protocols." "It is a tautology," Kieran said, leaning in. "They are saying you are defective because you resist the brainwashing." "Read the next line," Lyra said. Kieran read it. "Status of personhood, null and void. Subject is reclassified as biological asset class C." "They did not find a loophole," Lyra said, her voice shaking with a cold fury. "They manufactured one. They created a medical diagnosis that does not exist just so they could strip us of our rights. There is nothing wrong with us. Kieran, we are not sick. We are just immune. And that makes you dangerous." Kieran said. "If people knew that the obedience tech does not work on everyone, the illusion of control would shatter." Lyra spun her chair around. "It is not just about control. Look at the destination logs." She pulled up the map. Every single woman sold in the last 5 years, thousands of them, was routed to the same location. The Halcyon Array. It is located inside the atmosphere of a gas giant in the outer rim, Lyra said. A storm planet, impossible to scan from orbit. We have to go there, Kieran said. I know, Lyra said. But first, we need to know what they are doing there. She turned back to the screen, typing furiously. I am tracing the supply requests for the facility. If I can see what they are buying, I can figure out what they are building. While the computer crunched the data, the warehouse fell silent. The other women were asleep in the makeshift barracks. Zex was in the corner, recording a monologue into his wrist comp. Kieran walked to the small kitchenette and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a bottle he had found. He brought one to Lyra. Take a break, he said. Your eyes are bloodshot. Lyra accepted the glass. She spun the chair to face him again. She looked tired. The weight of the leadership she had taken on was pressing down on her. You are not sleeping either, she noted. Kieran took a sip of his drink. I have bad dreams. About what? About the people I did not save, Kieran said simply. Lyra looked at him. She saw the cracks in the armor then, the profound loneliness of a man who had betrayed his own caste to do the right thing, and found himself adrift in the universe because of it. She stood up. She put the glass down on the desk. Kieran, she said. He looked at her. Why me? She asked. In the auction, you looked at me. Why? Kieran hesitated. He swirled the liquid in his glass, watching the vortex. Because you looked like you were planning a murder, he said softly. Everyone else looked scared. You looked like you were calculating the structural integrity of the stage so you could bring it down. Lyra stepped closer. The space between them seemed to shrink, charged with the static of the servers humming beneath the floor. I was, Lyra admitted. I know, Kieran said. I thought, if I can save her, she might burn the whole world down for me. Lyra reached out. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. She touched his hand, the one holding the glass. Her fingers brushed against his knuckles. Kieran went still. He looked down at her hand, then up at her eyes. His breathing hitched. Lyra, he whispered. She stepped in, closing the distance. She could feel the heat radiating off him. She wanted to lean into it, to bury herself in the solidity of him, to forget the data and the danger and the weight of the thousands of women waiting in the dark. She tilted her head up. Kieran leaned down. Their foreheads touched. It was not a kiss, but it was intimate enough to make Lyra's heart hammer against her ribs. I am not a project, Kieran, she whispered. I am not a mission. I know, he breathed. You are the leader. Lyra pulled back just an inch, enough to look him in the eye. If we do this, she said, her voice fierce and low, if we cross this line, it is a choice. My choice. Your choice. Not a transaction. Not a rescue. It is the only way I would have it, Kieran said. His hand moved, fingers grazing her waist, hovering, asking for permission. Lyra nodded. He pulled her closer, his grip firm but gentle. For a moment, they just stood there, holding each other in the dim light of the server room, 2 broken people finding a jagged kind of fit. The computer beeped. The sound was sharp and intrusive. They sprang apart, breathless, their eyes wide. The data, Lyra said, her voice husky. She turned back to the screen. The supply manifest had decrypted. Kieran looked over her shoulder, his hand resting on the back of her chair. What are they ordering? He asked. Lyra scanned the list. high-capacity neural storage drives, synaptic mapping gel, industrial cooling units for supercomputers. She froze. "Kieran," Lyra said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They are not using the women for labor." "What is it?" "They are ordering extraction chairs," Lyra said. "This equipment, it is used to rip a neural pattern out of a biological brain. It kills the host, but it preserves the pathway." "Why?" Kieran asked, horrified. "Why would they want that?" "Because we are immune," Lyra realized. The horror washed over her, cold and absolute. "They do not want to fix us. They want to isolate the anomaly that makes us resist. If they can map the neural architecture of resistance, they can engineer a weapon to crush it." Kieran finished. "They are building a patch," Lyra said. "A universal update for the obedience tech. If they figure out how our brains block the signal, they can rewrite the signal to bypass the block. They are going to use our deaths to enslave everyone else. Permanently." The sound of the warehouse door crashing open shattered the revelation. Flashbangs rolled across the floor, detonating with blinding white light and deafening cracks. "Authority!" a voice screamed. "Secure the assets!" Kieran grabbed Lyra, shielding her body with his own as debris rained down. "We are compromised," Kieran shouted. "How?" Lyra yelled, coughing in the smoke. "No one knew we were here." A figure stepped through the smoke. It was a man Kieran recognized, Vargo, the info broker who had sold them the safe house code. He was standing behind the Authority strike team, looking apologetic but counting a stack of credit chits. "Sorry." "Vale," Vargo called out. "They offered me a full pardon for my smuggling charges. Nothing personal. It is just business." Kieran's face twisted in rage. He pulled his pistol. "Back door," Kieran ordered. The women were already moving. Jessa had drilled them for this. They did not panic. They grabbed their packs and moved toward the rear exit that led to the sewer maintenance tunnels. Zex was running with them, his forearms flailing, a camera drone hovering over his shoulder. "This is excellent footage," Zex screamed. "We are all going to die." They burst out into the alleyway. Rain slicked the pavement. Laser fire sizzled past them, scorching the brickwork. "To the ship," Lyra commanded. The run to the landing pad was a blur of neon and terror. They were pinned down twice, forced to trade fire with the pursuing squads. Kieran took a grazing shot to the shoulder but kept moving. Lyra used an overloaded power cell to blow up a bridge behind them, cutting off the first wave of pursuers. They reached the Samaritan just as the heavy assault shuttles began to descend from the clouds. "Get us in the air," Lyra shouted, shoving Alara up the ramp. Kieran vaulted into the pilot's seat, ignoring the blood soaking his sleeve. He punched the ignition. The ship roared, lifting off on raw thruster power, smashing through a billboard as it climbed toward orbit. They broke the atmosphere, shaking off the tracking locks of the Authority fighters. When they hit the jump point, the stars stretched into lines of infinite light, and silence finally returned to the ship. In the mess hall, the crew gathered. They were bruised, wet, and shaking. Kieran sat while the biochemist, a woman named Rena, dressed his wound. "He sold us out," Kieran said, staring at the floor. "Vargo. I trusted him." "Trust is a luxury," Lyra said. She was standing by the viewport, looking at the swirling vortex of hyperspace. "We cannot afford it anymore." She turned to face them. "We have a choice," Lyra said. Her voice was steady, harder than it had been before. "We escaped. We can keep running. There are systems on the edge of the galaxy where they will never find us. We can disappear." The women looked at her. "Or," Jessa asked. "Or we go to the Halcyon Array," Lyra said. Kieran looked up. "That is a suicide mission." "Lyra." It is a fortress inside a storm. We know what they are doing, Lyra said. She projected the data she had stolen onto the mess hall table. It was a schematic of the neural extraction device. They are killing our sisters to build a cage for the entire galaxy, Lyra said. If we run, we survive. But everyone else, every free thinker, every dissident, every child born with a spark of defiance, they will be crushed. The obedience tech will be perfect. There will be no more resistance, ever. She looked at Kieran. You said you wanted to burn it down. She said. Kieran stood up. He winced as his shoulder pulled, but he did not stop. He walked over to the table and looked at the hologram. It is not enough to destroy the facility, Kieran said. The data is already backed up. If we blow up the station, they will just build another one. Then what? Zex asked, clicking his claws nervously. We have to go inside, Kieran said. We have to upload a virus directly into their central core. We have to corrupt the research so it can never be used again. And we need to broadcast it, Lyra added. She looked at Zex. Can you do it? Can you transmit from inside a gas giant? Zex looked at the schematic. If I can tap into their communication array, yes. I can bounce the signal off the planet's magnetic field. I can turn the whole moon into a transmitter. Every screen in the two systems will see what is happening inside that slaughterhouse. It means we are not just escaping, Tala said softly. It means we are invading. Yes, Lyra said. She looked around the room. 20 women, 1 human ex-spy, 1 alien journalist. We are defective, Lyra said, a fierce smile cutting through the gloom. We are broken. We are disposable. She slammed her hand down on the table. Let us show them exactly what a defect looks like. Kieran looked at her, and the love and respect in his eyes were no longer hidden. He nodded. Set a course for the Halcyon array, Kieran said. We are done running. Now, we revolt. The descent into the atmosphere of the gas giant Boros was not a flight. It was a controlled fall into a hurricane that had been raging for 10,000 years. The Samaritan shuddered violently, the hull groaning under the pressure of the shearing winds. Outside the reinforced viewports, there was nothing but a churning wall of violet and bruised black clouds, lit periodically by lightning strikes that were thick enough to vaporize a frigate. Hold her steady, Lyra shouted from the co-pilot seat, her hands flying across the sensor array. I am trying, Kieran gritted out, wrestling with the yoke. The turbulence is shredding the stabilizers. Where is the approach vector? It is hidden in the magnetic interference, Lyra said. Jessa, give me the frequency. In the engineering bay, strapped into a crash couch. Jessa screamed over the roar of the engines. 300 gigahertz. Modulate the shield harmonics to match the storm pattern. Kieran adjusted the dials. The ship bucked once, hard, and then suddenly, the violent shaking ceased. They had punched through the outer wall of the storm and entered the eye. It was a dead zone of terrifying calm. And there, floating in the center of the void, suspended by massive gravity tethers, was the Halcyon array. It was an ugly thing, a sprawling industrial fortress of black metal and blinking red lights, shaped like a dagger pointing down into the crushed heart of the planet. It did not look like a research station. It looked like a prison built for ghosts. We are in the blind spot, Lyra whispered. Sensors show the maintenance docks are cycling on an automated rhythm. We have 90 seconds to dock before the sweep comes back around. Kieran pushed the throttle. The Samaritan glided forward, a silent predator in the dark. The docking procedure was a masterpiece of illegal piloting. Kieran matched the rotation of the station perfectly, sliding the ship into the auxiliary waste disposal port just as the massive blast doors began to grind shut. The magnetic clamps engaged with a heavy metallic thud. "We are inside." Kieran exhaled, slumping back in his seat. The mission clock started now. They moved fast. The team was split into 2 units. Alpha Team, Lyra, Kieran, and Zex would push for the central archival wing to secure the data. Bravo Team, Tala, Jessa, and the others would rig the docking bay with explosives to cover their escape and secure the perimeter. They wore stolen technician uniforms, gray and nondescript, with reforged ID badges that identified them as sanitation maintenance. Zex was the hardest to disguise. The Varaxian journalist was draped in a heavy environmental suit that hid his extra arms, with a bucket of cleaning solvent hanging from one claw to complete the illusion. "Stop clicking," Lyra hissed as they moved down the first corridor. "I am nervous," Zex whispered back, the synthesizer around his neck modulating his voice to a low hum. "And this suit smells like wet dog. Just keep the camera rolling," Kieran muttered. The interior of the Halcyon array was vast and cold. The air smelled of ozone and something copper-sharp, like dried blood. It was quiet, but not silent. The station hummed with a strange, melodic drone. "It is the security hymn," Lyra said, pausing to listen. Kieran looked at her. "The what?" "The Kalan neural security protocols," Lyra explained. "They do not use passwords. They use tonal frequencies that shift every 10 seconds. If your badge does not emit the counter frequency, the automated turrets in the ceiling drop down and cut you in half." She pulled out a small device she had built from ship scraps. It looked like a tuning fork wired to a battery. "I need to harmonize us," she said. She held the device up. It emitted a high-pitched whine. The humming in the air seemed to wobble, then sync with the device. The red lights on the ceiling cameras blinked green. "Move," Lyra commanded. They passed through the outer ring without incident, navigating the labyrinth of corridors. They saw glimpses of the work being done here. Laboratories filled with cages, assembly lines building intricate, spider-like headsets. But the true horror waited in the surgical archival wing. They breached the heavy double doors using a stolen admin code Kieran had pulled from the files on Xylos. The room beyond was a cavernous space, chilled to near freezing. Rows of glass tanks stretched into the darkness, hundreds of them, bathed in a pale blue preservation fluid. Kieran walked to the nearest tank and wiped the condensation from the glass. He recoiled. It was a man, a human man, perhaps 40 years old, floating in suspension. His head was shaved, and a metallic lattice had been drilled directly into his skull. "Read the placard," Lyra said, her voice shaking. Kieran looked at the digital readout at the base of the tank. Subject 89 Delta, former union organizer. Designation, Defective. Status, neural harvesting complete. "They are not just women," Kieran whispered. Lyra walked down the row. She saw faces she recognized from news feeds. A missing poet from the colony worlds. A student leader who had vanished during the riots on Terra. Aliens. Humans. It did not matter. "This is where they put the conscience of the galaxy," Lyra said. "They did not kill them. They put them on ice and stripped them for parts." She stopped at a central console. A man in a pristine white lab coat was working there, his back to them. He was humming along with the security hymn. Lyra stiffened. She knew that posture, and she knew the precise, arrogant tilt of the head. "Dr. Valerius," she said. The scientist froze. He turned slowly. He was an older Kalan, his face sharp and refined, with silver eyes that had once looked at Lyra with pride. "Lyra Voss," Valerius said. He did not sound surprised. He sounded disappointed. "I wondered if you would come." deviation in your neural pattern always did drive you toward irrational risks. You taught me structural engineering, Lyra said, stepping closer, her hand hovering near the stun pistol at her belt. You taught me that a structure is only as strong as its integrity. I did, Valerius nodded. And society is a structure. Lyra, it requires stability. It requires all the bricks to sit flush. He gestured to the tanks around them. These bricks were crooked, he said. They refused to fit. They caused friction. We simply smoothed them out. You murdered them, Kieran said, stepping up beside Lyra. We repurposed them, Valerius snapped, his composure cracking. We are building a new world, human, a world without conflict, without the chaotic noise of dissent. We extract the chaotic pathways, the stubbornness, the rebellion, and we map them so we can delete them from the next generation. He looked at Lyra with a sneer. You were my greatest student, Lyra, and my greatest failure. You are a failed iteration, a glitch in the code that I should have deleted years ago. Lyra looked at him. She felt the old sting of his disapproval, the desire to please the mentor who had raised her. Then she looked at the tank behind him, at the dead eyes of the union organizer. I am not a glitch, Lyra said softly. I am the patch that fixes the system. She raised her pistol. Step away from the console. Valerius. The scientist laughed. You cannot stop it. The upload is already at 90%. The new compliance firmware is being broadcast to the fleet as we speak. He slammed his hand down on a red button on the console. Alarms screamed to life. The security hymn turned into a dissonant shriek. The blast doors at the far end of the room began to open, revealing a squad of heavy shock troopers. We have company, Zex shouted, diving behind a desk as a plasma bolt scorched the air where his head had been. Kieran returned fire, taking cover behind a stasis tank. Lyra, get the data. I will hold them off. Lyra sprinted to the console. Valerius tried to block her, pulling a scalpel from his pocket. Lyra didn't slow down. She used her momentum to shoulder check him, sending the older scientist sprawling across the floor. She began typing furiously. The system was locked down. A massive firewall stood between her and the core data. I cannot break it, Lyra yelled over the noise of the firefight. It is biometric. It needs a direct neural handshake. She looked at the empty interface chair in the center of the room. It was a terrifying device, a reclined seat with a halo of needles and sensors designed to drill into the skull. The chair, she said. No, Kieran shouted, firing 2 shots into the chest of an advancing trooper. That thing will lobotomize you. It is designed to overwhelm a standard mind, Lyra shouted back. But I am not standard. My immunity, it rejects the signal. If I interface, I can push back. I can overload the sensors with my own biofeedback. It is suicide. It is the only way. Lyra jumped into the chair. She didn't wait for permission. She grabbed the connection helmet and jammed it onto her head. The world turned white. Pain. It was not physical pain. It was the pain of 1,000 voices screaming in her head at once. The machine tried to seize her motor functions. It tried to rewrite her memories. It tried to tell her that she was small, that she was obedient, that she was nothing. Lyra gritted her teeth and screamed. She grabbed that screaming voice and turned it into a weapon. She pushed. She felt the machine hesitate. It had never encountered a mind that pushed back. It was confused. Lyra visualized the firewall as a physical wall of glass. She threw her entire will against it. Break. On the screens above, the red lockdown bars shattered. The code turned green. I am in, Lyra gasped, blood trickling from her nose. She didn't just unlock the data, she reversed the flow. She accessed the station's internal sensors. "Blind them," she whispered. She sent a surge of feedback through the security grid. Every camera in the facility blew out in a shower of sparks. The automated turrets spun wildly and deactivated. The lights in the room flickered and died, plunging the wing into emergency red gloom. Kieran took the advantage. He vaulted the desk, moving like a shadow in the dark. He engaged the troopers in close quarters, using the confusion to disarm them. Lyra ripped the helmet off, gasping for air. Her head felt like it had been split open. She slumped forward. Kieran was there in a second. He caught her before she hit the floor. "I have you," he said, his voice ragged. "I have you." Lyra looked up at him. Her vision was swimming, but she saw his face. It was smeared with soot and sweat, terrified and fierce. Did I get it?" she whispered. "You got it," Kieran said. "You burned out the whole grid." He pulled her up, wrapping his arm around her waist to support her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving them both trembling. The room was quiet now, save for the groans of the incapacitated troopers and the distant wail of the station-wide alarm. Kieran looked at her, and in that moment, the war stopped. He reached up and wiped the blood from her upper lip with his thumb. His hand was shaking. "Do not ever do that again," he said. "I cannot promise that," Lyra said. Kieran let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her neck. It was a desperate embrace, born of the realization of how close he had come to watching her mind be erased. Lyra held him back, her fingers tangling in his hair. They stood there in the ruin of the laboratory, surrounded by the frozen dead. "If we die here," Kieran whispered into her skin. "We are not going to die," Lyra said fierce. "But if we do, we die standing. We die choosing." Kieran pulled back to look at her. His eyes searched hers. "I choose you," he said. "Not as a savior. As a partner," Lyra smiled. "A weak, bloody thing. I choose you too. Human. Now get me the hell out of here." From behind a row of tanks, Zex popped up, his camera drone hovering unsteadily. "Touching," Zex narrated to the invisible audience. "Truly moving. But might I suggest we flee before the backup generator kicks in and the murder bots wake up? Also, I believe I just stepped in something acidic." They grabbed the drive containing the core data, the proof of the treaty, the names of the victims, the neural maps, and ran. The escape was a chaotic blur. The station was waking up, angry. Blast doors were slamming shut. The catwalks in the central shaft were retracting. They met up with Bravo team at the airlock. Jessa had wired the blast doors with mining charges. "Blow it!" Kieran shouted. The explosion rocked the station. The doors blew outward, sucking the smoke and debris into the vacuum of the maintenance bay. They scrambled up the ramp of the Samaritan. Kieran hit the ignition before the ramp was even closed. The ship tore away from the docking clamps, scraping paint against the hull of the station. Behind them, the Halcyon array lit up with defensive fire. Green plasma bolts streaked past the cockpit. "Get us to jump distance," Lyra shouted from the co-pilot seat. "I am trying," Kieran yelled. "The gravity well is too deep." A massive shadow fell over the ship, a dreadnought. It rose from the clouds beneath them, a leviathan of war. It was sleek, predatory, and painted in the colors of the Kalen High Command. "We are being hailed," Jessa shouted from the comm station. "Priority channel. Put it on screen," Lyra said. The main monitor flickered to life. A face appeared. Lyra went cold. It was General Rylan, the hero of the border wars, the man whose poster had hung on her wall when she was a child. He looked older now, scarred, but his eyes were the same steel gray. "Commander Voss," Ryland said. His voice was calm, paternal. "Power down your engines." Lyra stared at the screen. "You? You are the facility commander?" "I am the guardian of the peace," Ryland said. "You have stolen classified military assets." "Lyra, you are confused. You think you are fighting for freedom, but you are fighting for chaos. You are lobotomizing people." "General," Lyra shouted, "you are erasing them. I am saving us from civil war," Ryland roared back, his calm facade breaking. "Do you have any idea how fragile our alliance with the humans is? The dissidents, the protests, the factions, it will tear our worlds apart. We need unity. Absolute unity. And if I have to prune a few branches to save the tree, I will do it." "That is not unity," Lyra said, her voice shaking with rage. "That is a graveyard." "It is necessary," Ryland said. "Return the data, Lyra, and I will ensure you are treated with leniency. You are a patriot. You just lost your way." Lyra looked at Kieran. He was watching her, his hand hovering over the hyperdrive lever. He would do whatever she said. He would surrender if she asked. He would die if she asked. She looked back at the general. "I am not a patriot," Lyra said. "I am defective, and I would rather be broken and free than whole and on my knees." She cut the channel. "Punch it!" Lyra screamed. Kieran slammed the lever forward. The Samaritan shuddered as the hyperdrive engines kicked in inside the gravity well, a maneuver that should have torn the ship apart. Space bent. The stars elongated. The dreadnought fired a massive ion cannon. The beam grazed their shields, stripping them away instantly and burning a blackened scar across the hull. "Warning! Hull breach in Cargo Bay 4! The ship's computer screamed. But they were gone. The ship vanished into the white tunnel of hyperspace. They dropped out of warp 10 minutes later in deep space, the engines smoking and the hull groaning. They were alive. Lyra slumped in her chair. "We got it," she whispered. "We have the proof. We have the names." Kieran found the file on the senator and the minister. "We have everything." Zex drifted into the cockpit. He was not clicking. He was holding his data pad, his eyes wide. Friends," Zex said. "We might have a problem." "What?" Kieran asked, wiping sweat from his eyes. "General Ryland just went live on the interstellar news feed," Zex said. He tapped a button, and the feed projected onto the main screen. General Ryland stood at a podium, looking grave and heroic. The caption beneath him read, "Terrorist attack on medical research facility. Citizens," Ryland said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Tonight, a tragedy occurred. A rogue paramilitary group attacked the Halcyon Medical Station. They destroyed vital research intended to cure neurodegenerative diseases." He paused. "We have identified the leader of this cell. It is the disgraced human aristocrat, Kieran Vale." A picture of Kieran appeared on the screen, a grainy image from the auction house. "This man is a predator," Ryland continued. "Records show he recently purchased 20 mentally unstable alien women from a rehabilitation center. He is now using these vulnerable individuals as human shields and soldiers in his private war against order. He has brainwashed them. He has weaponized their illness." The screen changed to show footage of Lyra shooting the guards in the lab, edited to make it look like she was executing unarmed staff. "These women are victims," Ryland said. "They are defective, and they have been bought by a monster. We must rescue them. I am authorizing a system-wide bounty on Kieran Vale, dead or alive." The feed ended. Silence filled the cockpit. Kieran stared at the black screen. He looked pale. "They twisted it," he whispered. "They took the truth and they inverted it." He is good, Lyra said. Her voice was cold. He used the auction. He used the title. One human bought them all. He is using your rescue to paint you as a slaver. Kieran looked at Lyra. They will hunt us. Every bounty hunter, every patrol ship. They will think they are saving you from me. Lyra stood up. She walked over to him. She placed her hands on his shoulders. Let them come, she said. Kieran looked up at her. Lyra? They think I am a victim, Lyra said. They think I am your property? She leaned down, her eyes burning with a dangerous light. Wait until they hear me speak. She turned to Zex. How long until you can edit the footage from the lab? Zex clicked his mandibles, a sharp, angry sound. An hour. I will add subtitles, sarcastic ones. Do it, Lyra said. She looked out at the stars. They want a war? She said softly. We will give them a revolution. The heavy industrial smog of Vector 6 did not just hang in the air, it stained the lungs. This was a floating slum city, a sprawling rusted platform suspended by failing magnetic tethers beneath the gleaming underbelly of the orbital capital. Here, the sun was a rumor, and the rain tasted like battery acid. It was the perfect place to disappear. Kieran Vale stood by the window of the safe house, a repurposed shipping container welded to the side of a ventilation shaft. He watched the holographic news feed flickering on the building opposite them. It was a massive projection, 50 feet high, dominating the skyline of the poor. It showed his face. The headline screamed in jagged red letters, "The Merchant of Misery. Manhunt continues for human trafficker Kieran Vale." Beneath his image, a loop played. It was the footage from the Halcyon Array, skillfully edited by General Ryland's propaganda machine. It showed Kieran dragging Lyra out of the lab. It showed him firing a weapon. It stripped away the context of rescue and replaced it with the brutal visual language of abduction. They are burning you in effigy in the upper districts, Zex said. The Varaxian journalist was sitting on a crate, monitoring the data streams. He was not clicking his mandibles today. The mood in the room was too heavy for his usual theatrics. The public opinion algorithms are shifting, Zex reported, his synthesized voice low. Before Ryland's broadcast, the Outer Rim was celebrating the escape. Now, the narrative has fractured. Half the system thinks you are a hero fighting the establishment. The other half thinks you are a perverted aristocrat who brainwashed 20 vulnerable women to build a harem. Kieran turned away from the window. He looked exhausted. The stubble on his jaw was dark, and his eyes were hollowed out by guilt. I made it easy for them, Kieran said. His voice was rough. I bought you. That is the only fact that matters to the public. The transaction is the weapon they are using to beat us. Lyra was sitting at the central table, cleaning her stun pistol. She slammed the energy cartridge back into the slot with a sharp mechanical snap. Stop it, she said. Kieran looked at her. Stop what? Stop taking credit for their lies, Lyra said. She stood up and walked over to him. You did what you had to do to get us off the auction block. Rylan is just twisting the knife because he is scared. He knows we have the data. But it is working? Lyra, Kieran insisted. He gestured to the women huddled in the corner of the container. Look at them. They are afraid to go outside, not because of the police, but because the people, the very people we are trying to save, might spit on them. They think I own you. Then we tell them you do not, Lyra said. Kieran shook his head. If I issue a statement, it just looks like I am manipulating the narrative. If I deny it, I look defensive. Not you, Lyra said. Us. She turned to the room. The 20 women looked up. They were tired. They were wearing scavenged clothes. oversized mechanics' coveralls and synthetic wool coats, but their eyes were not the eyes of victims. Tala stood up first. Her violet skin was smudged with grease, but her posture was regal. "He is right." "Lyra," Tala said quietly, "as long as we are silent, we are just props in a story about two men fighting. Rylan plays the savior. Kieran plays the villain. We are just the prize." "So we change the script," Lyra said. "We stop being the rescued. We start being the resistance." "How?" Jessa asked from the floor, where she was rewiring a comms unit. "We speak," Lyra said. "Zex, can you set up a secure recording environment? Something raw, no filters, no edits." Zex's eyes brightened. "I can make it look like cinema verite. Gritty, authentic. Do it," Lyra commanded. The recording session took place in the back of the container, against a wall of rusted steel rivets. There was no script. There was no rehearsal. Zex set up the camera drone, hovering it at eye level. Tala went first. She sat on a wooden stool, looking directly into the lens. "My name is Tala Vane," she said. Her voice did not shake. "The authority says I am defective because I possess a linguistic divergence. They say I cannot process authority." She leaned forward. "The truth is that I translated the Treaty of Silence. I know what our government signed away. I am not defective because I am broken. I am defective because I refuse to lie." Kieran Vale did not buy my silence. He bought my microphone. Next was Jessa. She wiped her hands on her trousers and grinned, a sharp, dangerous expression. "My name is Jessa Krell. I am an engineer. They called me unstable because I reconfigured the safety protocols on the mining drones to protect the workers, not the ore. They wanted a machine. They got a conscience. That is my defect, and I am keeping it. One by one. They sat in the chair. The botanist who refused to poison the water table. The poet who wrote satires about the High Council. The mother who bit a guard who tried to take her daughter. They reclaimed the word. They took defective and turned it into a badge of honor. They stripped away the narrative of the helpless victim and replaced it with the reality of dangerous competence. Finally, it was Lyra's turn. She sat down. She did not look at the camera immediately. She looked at Kieran, who was standing in the shadows behind Zex, watching her with an intensity that made the air hum. "My name is Lyra Voss," she said. She looked at the lens. "General Rylan calls me a victim. He says I was purchased. He says I am property." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "The only thing Kieran Vale bought was a chance. What we do with it belongs to us. We are not his army. We are not his harem. We are the consequences of your actions. General, you tried to delete us. You failed, and now we are going to return the favor." She stood up. "Cut," Lyra said. Zex let out a long, whistling breath. That is going to melt the servers." "When do we broadcast?" Kieran asked, stepping into the light. "Not yet," Lyra said. "We need leverage. A broadcast is just noise unless we can force them to listen. We need a stage where they cannot turn us off." She pulled up the stolen schedule she had hacked from the local news grid. "Tomorrow night," Lyra said, "the Grand Unity Gala. It is being held in the Spire of Commerce, 10 miles above us." Kieran looked at the file. "The senator and the alien minister are both attending. It is a live event. All the major networks will be covering it. If we can hijack the main projection system in the ballroom," Lyra said, "we can play the testimonies and the data from the Halcyon array simultaneously. They will be surrounded by the truth while they are drinking their champagne." "It is a fortress," Kieran said, analyzing the security specs. Biometric scanners at every entrance. DNA sweepers in the ventilation. I know, Lyra said. That is why we are not going to break in. We are going to walk in. Kieran looked at her. How? You are Kieran Vale, Lyra said, a small, sly smile touching her lips. You are a disgraced aristocrat, yes. But you are still on the guest list. They have not updated the database since the warrant was issued this morning. The automated invitation system still thinks you are a VIP. If I walk in there, Kieran said, the security guards will shoot me on sight. Not if you create a distraction, Lyra said, and not if you have the best staff in the system. She gestured to the women. We need uniforms, we need access codes, and we need to look like we belong. The planning session lasted until the early hours of the morning. When the strategy was set, a complex web of digital loops, stolen catering credentials, and precise timing, the group dispersed to rest. Lyra found Kieran on the small metal balcony that overlooked the acidic fog. He was leaning on the railing, the wind whipping his dark hair. You should sleep, Lyra said softly, closing the door behind her. I cannot, Kieran said. I keep seeing Ryland's face. I keep thinking about what happens if this goes wrong. If I walk you into that spire and they trap us. Then we fight, Lyra said. She moved to stand beside him. Kieran turned to her. He looked tortured. I promise to keep you safe. Bringing you into the lion's den is not keeping you safe. Lyra reached out and took his face in her hands. Her skin was cool against his feverish heat. Kieran, listen to me. He went still, his eyes searching hers. You are treating me like a vase again, Lyra said gently. I am not glass. I am carbon fiber. I do not need you to wrap me in cotton. I need you to stand next to me while we throw the bricks. I am afraid, Kieran admitted. His voice was a whisper, stripped of all its usual confidence. I am afraid of losing you, not the mission, you. Lyra felt her own heart stutter. The admission hung between them, heavy and real. You will not lose me, Lyra said, unless you try to hold me back. That is the only way you lose me. She rose on her tiptoes. This time, there was no hesitation, no testing of boundaries. She kissed him. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the escape. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was acclaiming. It tasted of rain and rust and the terrifying, beautiful promise of a future they might not live to see. Kieran's arms went around her, pulling her flush against him. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. The kiss deepened, becoming a conversation without words, a confession of loneliness, a plea for forgiveness, and a vow of loyalty. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. Kieran rested his forehead against hers. I am not your owner, he whispered. No, Lyra said, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. You are my equal. She pulled back slightly, looking him in the eye. Tonight, we are just Kieran and Lyra. Tomorrow, we are soldiers again. But right now, I want to be a person. I can do that, Kieran said. They stood there in the smog, holding hands, watching the lights of the city blink out one by one. It was a small moment of peace stolen from the jaws of a war. But it was enough. The next evening, the spire of commerce was a beacon of gold light piercing the clouds. Limousines and luxury shuttles docked at the private landing pads, disgorging the elite of two systems. The ballroom was a sea of silk, jewels, and hypocrisy. Kieran Vale walked through the main entrance. He was wearing a tuxedo he had synthesized in the slums. It fit perfectly, though the material was a grade lower than what he usually wore. He walked with the arrogant stride of a man who owned the building. He approached the security checkpoint. The drone scanned his face. Identity confirmed. Lord Kieran Vale. Welcome. The drone did not know he was a fugitive. The warrant update was stuck in a loop Lyra had created 10 minutes ago. Kieran stepped into the ballroom. He kept his head high, a glass of champagne in his hand, looking bored. Inside, his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The room rippled. People turned to stare. Whispers broke out like wildfire. Is that him? The slaver? Why is he here? Perfect, Kieran murmured into his cufflink comms. They are looking at me. We are in position. Lyra's voice came back, clear and calm in his ear. Lyra was not wearing a gown. She was wearing the stiff, high-collared uniform of the catering staff. She was carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she kept her eyes lowered. Behind her, scattered through the room, were the others. Jessa was behind the bar, mixing drinks with lethal precision. Tala was manning the cloakroom. Zex was hiding in a service vent in the ceiling, wired into the lighting rig. The plan was simple. Kieran would draw the eyes. The women would plant the data spikes. Kieran moved through the crowd. A heavy-set mining baron blocked his path. You have some nerve showing your face here. Vale, the baron sneered. After what you did, Kieran took a sip of his drink. And what did I do, exactly? Other than outbid you? The baron spluttered. You bought people, and you buy planets and strip them until the atmosphere is poison, Kieran said coolly. Spare me the morality play. Baron, we are all monsters here. I am just the only one who admits it. He walked past, leaving the man stunned. Lyra moved through the crowd, offering canapes. Crab cake? She asked a tall, elegant alien woman who was draped in furs. The woman did not even look at her. She just waved a hand dismissively. Go away, servant. Lyra smiled sweetly. Of course, madam. As she turned, she brushed against the woman's handbag. With a sleight of hand that would have made a pickpocket weep, she slipped a small, black disc into the side pocket. Spike one is planted, Lyra whispered. Jessa, behind the bar, was serving a drink to a general's aide. Make it strong, the aide said. I have to listen to the senator speak in 10 minutes. Coming right up, Jessa said. She placed the glass on the coaster. Underneath the coaster, she stuck a magnetic repeater. Spike 2 is active, Jessa reported. They worked the room like ghosts. The elite were so accustomed to ignoring the service staff that they were invisible. Their arrogance was their blind spot. The women they called Defective were outmaneuvering them with trays of appetizers. Kieran reached the front of the room. The senator, a human named Corvus with a face like a hawk, was shaking hands with Minister Varen, a Kalan official with sad eyes. Kieran stopped 10 feet away. He adjusted his tie. This was the trigger point. Lyra, he whispered. I am at the dais. Target acquired, Lyra said. She was standing by the main projector control, pretending to polish a brass railing. Suddenly, the music stopped. A chime rang out. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice announced. Please welcome Senator Corvus and Minister Varen. The crowd applauded. The lights dimmed, focusing on the stage. Now, Lyra said. She reached for the panel. Stop right there. A hand grabbed Lyra's wrist. She froze. She turned slowly. A security officer was standing there. He was not a regular guard. He was wearing the black insignia of the Cyber Warfare Division. You are not catering staff, the officer said. His visor was glowing red. The AI just flagged a neural anomaly in this sector. You are one of the defectives. Lyra looked at his grip on her arm. She calculated the angle. She could break his thumb, but he would shout. "I am just polishing the rail, sir," Lyra said, trying to pitch her voice into submission. "Drop the act," the officer hissed. He reached for his radio. "Control. We have a breach in the—" Lyra moved. She twisted her wrist, dropped her tray with a deafening crash, and kicked the officer in the knee. He grunted, buckling. Kieran saw the commotion. He abandoned his position and started running toward the stage, shoving people out of the way. "Do it! Lyra!" he screamed. Lyra lunged for the panel. The officer grabbed her ankle, dragging her down. The room erupted in panic. Guards were pouring in from the side doors. "Secure the exits," Senator Corvus shouted from the stage. Lyra kicked the officer in the face, scrambling free. She lunged for the console again, but a second guard was there, raising a shock baton. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow. It never came. "Let her go!" A voice boomed. The guard hesitated. Minister Varen had stepped down from the dais. He was standing over Lyra, his hand raised. "Minister?" the guard asked, confused. "She is a terrorist. She is a citizen," Varen shouted. "And she has the floor." The room went silent. Kieran stopped running, staring at the minister. Varen looked at Lyra. His eyes were filled with a profound, crushing shame. He looked at the bruised woman on the floor, dressed in a servant's uniform. "I signed the order," Varen whispered to her. "I signed the treaty that let them sell you. I thought it was for the greater good." He looked up at the crowd, then back at Lyra. "I was wrong." He reached down and offered Lyra his hand. "Play it," he said. Lyra took his hand and he pulled her up. She looked at him, seeing the regret etched into his features. "Thank you," she said. She turned to the console and slammed her palm onto the override key. The giant holographic screen behind the stage flickered. The logo of the Grand Unity Gala vanished. Static filled the air. And then, Tala's face appeared, 50 feet high, looking down at the senators and the billionaires. "My name is Tala Vane," the giant image spoke. "And I am not a product." The crowd gasped. Lyra typed furiously, cueing the next file. "My name is Jessa Krell." The screen boomed. "And I am not a machine." Kieran climbed onto the stage, drawing his pistol. Not to threaten, but to stand guard. He stood between the crowd and Lyra, facing the room. The screen shifted again. It showed the Halcyon Array. It showed the tanks. It showed the dead human union organizer. It showed the extraction chairs. Senator Corvus turned pale. "Cut the feed!" he screamed. "Kill the power, I cannot!" A technician yelled from the booth. "It is locked out. The signal is coming from everywhere." Lyra looked at Kieran. She nodded. "Zex," she commanded over the comms. "Go live. On the screen." Lyra's own face appeared, recorded in the rusted container. "My name is Lyra Voss," the recording said, "and you called me defective." In the ballroom, the real Lyra stood tall, her catering uniform looking like armor under the stage lights. The recording continued. "But look at what we have done. We escaped your prisons. We burned your labs. And now, we are in your house." The image on the screen shifted to a live feed of the ballroom itself. The camera panned across the shocked faces of the elite, the terrified senator, the weeping minister. "We are not hiding anymore," Lyra's voice echoed. "We are here to file a grievance." Sirens began to wail in the distance. The skylights shattered as authority dropships descended. Kieran grabbed Lyra's hand. "Time to go," he said. Minister Varen looked at them. "Go out the back," he said rapidly. "My private shuttle is on pad 4. The codes are Alpha 9 Blue." "Why?" Lyra asked him. "Because I do not want to die a monster," Varen said. Kieran nodded to him. "A salute. Move!" Kieran shouted to the women scattered in the crowd. Jessa vaulted the bar. Tala threw a fur coat over a guard's head. They converged on the stage, a chaotic, beautiful tide of gray uniforms. They ran for the rear exit, the sound of their own voices thundering from the speakers above them, telling the galaxy that the sale was canceled and the revolution had begun. The shuttle touched down on the private landing pad of the Galactic Tribunal with a heavy, final thud. The engines whined down, the sound dying into the humid air of the capital city, inside the cabin. The silence was loud. Lyra Voss stood up. She smoothed the front of the charcoal gray tunic she had synthesized on the flight over. It was sharp, professional, and utterly devoid of the markings of a servant. She looked at the reflection in the viewport. She did not look like a fugitive. She looked like a prosecutor. "We are live in 5 minutes," Zek said. The Varaxian journalist was checking the battery levels on his drone swarm. He looked nervous, his mandibles clicking softly against his chest carapace. "The entire network is watching," Zex continued. "The broadcast from the gala broke the internet, but the government firewall is trying to scrub it. They are calling it a deep fake. This hearing, this is the only chance to make the truth stick." Kieran Vale stood by the airlock. He checked the load on his pistol, then holstered it beneath his jacket. He looked at Lyra. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra looked at the 20 women sitting in the passenger seats. They were no longer the terrified group from the holding pen. They were the witnesses. They held data pads containing their own medical records, their own histories, and the proof of their erasure. "I am ready," Lyra said. She looked at Kieran. "Do not stand in front of me today," she said. Kieran nodded, a small, proud smile touching his lips. "I will be right behind you." The airlock hissed open. The Grand Tribunal Hall was a cavernous amphitheater of white marble and floating gravity pods. It was the seat of justice for 2 star systems, a place where treaties were signed and wars were declared. Today, it was a shark tank. The air was thick with the noise of 1,000 shouting voices. Senators, delegates, and lobbyists were screaming over each other. The press gallery was overflowing. In the center of the room, on a raised podium of obsidian, sat the high justices. And below them, standing in the well of the court like a statue of aggrieved nobility, was General Rylan. "Order!" the Chief Justice bellowed, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "Order in the tribunal." The noise subsided to a sullen roar. "We are here to address the emergency motion regarding the terrorist attack on the Halcyon Array," the justice said. "General Rylan, you have the floor." Rylan adjusted his uniform. He looked impeccable. He projected an aura of calm, weary strength. "High Justices," Rylan began, his voice smooth and deep. "We are facing a crisis of misinformation. The criminals who attacked our research facility are desperate. They are led by a human trafficker, Kieran Vale, who purchased 20 mentally unstable women for his own amusement." He gestured to the empty air, as if summoning the specter of Kieran's guilt. "He has brainwashed them," Rylan said with sad conviction. "He has used drugs and psychological torture to turn them against their own people. The footage you saw at the gala was a fabrication, a sophisticated lie designed to destabilize our alliance." Senator Corvus stood up from his pod, his face flushed. "We have the financial records," Corvus shouted. 100 million credits. The auction sold defective alien women, and 1 human bought them all. It is a matter of public record. Are we to believe that a man who buys people is a liberator? The crowd murmured. The narrative was simple. It was ugly, and it was working. Rylan nodded to the senator. "Exactly," Rylan said. "These women are property. They are sick. They need medical intervention, not a microphone. I ask the tribunal to authorize immediate containment. We must rescue them from this predator. The Chief Justice nodded. The motion seems sound, unless there is a counter-argument. There is, a voice rang out. It did not come from a pod. It came from the main entrance. The heavy doors swung open. Lyra Voss walked in. She walked down the central aisle, her head high, her stride eating up the distance to the podium. Behind her walked Kieran Vale, and behind him, in a V formation, walked the 20 women of the Halcyon survivors. They were flanked by 4 heavily armed guards, not authority security but private contractors hired by the grassroots advocacy groups that had seen the broadcast and mobilized within the hour. The room went deadly silent. Lyra stopped at the defense bar. She looked up at the justices. She did not bow. "My name is Lyra Voss," she said. Her voice was unamplified, but it carried to the back of the room. "And I am not here to be rescued." General Ryland turned slowly. His eyes narrowed. "You are a fugitive, Commander Voss," Ryland said coldly. "You have no standing here." "I have every standing," Lyra said. "I am a citizen of the Alliance, and I have brought evidence." She slammed a data drive onto the sensor plate of the defense bar. Zex, hovering near the ceiling with his drones, patched the feed directly into the tribunal's main screen. The image of the treaty appeared, the signature of Minister Varon, the signature of Senator Corvus, and the clause that defined defective as a revocation of personhood. "This is the law you are upholding," Lyra said, pointing at the screen. "You did not sell us because we were sick. You sold us because we were inconvenient. You created a loophole to traffic dissidents, and you called it medicine." "Lies," Senator Corvus screamed. "That document is a forgery, is it?" Lyra asked. "Then why did Minister Varon give me his personal codes to land here?" She looked at the senator. He went pale. Ryland stepped forward, trying to regain control of the room. He looked at the cameras, ignoring Lyra. "Citizens, look at the man standing behind her," Ryland said, pointing a finger at Kieran. "Look at Kieran Vale. He paid 100 million credits for these women. Do you deny that, Mr. Vale?" Kieran stepped forward. The cameras swiveled to him. He looked at Ryland, then at the justices. "I do not deny it," Kieran said. A gasp went through the room. "I bought them," Kieran continued, his voice steady. "I walked into that auction house, and I paid the price you set." He looked at the crowd, "But I did not buy them to own them. I bought them because it was the only way to get them out of the room alive." He turned to look at Lyra. "General Ryland calls that purchase a crime," Kieran said. "I call it the crack in the cage. It was the moment the system failed. Because you thought money was the only power that mattered. You thought that if I paid for them, they would belong to me." He stepped back, gesturing to the women. "But dignity cannot be bought. It can only be recognized. I did not save these women. They saved themselves. I just drove the getaway car." Kieran retreated to the back of the group, leaving the stage entirely to Lyra and the others. It was a powerful visual. The human man, the supposed master, fading into the background, leaving the defective women standing in the light. Tala stepped up beside Lyra. "I am the linguist you sold," Tala said into the record, "and I can read the subcode in the Halcyon files." Jessa stepped up. "I am the engineer," she said, "and I know how the extraction chairs work." One by one, they stepped forward. They were not a harem. They were a phalanx. Ryland saw the mood shifting. The senators were checking their data pads, seeing the live polling data crash. The public was not buying the victim narrative anymore. They were seeing a revolution. Rylan dropped the mask of the concerned protector. His face hardened into the cold granite of the fanatic. "Enough!" Rylan barked. He turned to the justices. "You are listening to the ravings of anarchists," Rylan shouted. "Do you know what we were building at the Halcyon Array? Do you?" He looked around the room, his eyes wild. "We were building peace. We were building a galaxy without war. The compliance tech, it stops the conflict before it begins. It harmonizes the population. Yes. We removed the jagged edges. Yes, we silenced the troublemakers. But is that too high a price for eternal stability?" He pointed at Lyra. "She speaks of freedom. But freedom is just another word for chaos. Freedom is the right to starve, the right to kill, the right to disagree until the streets run with blood. I offered you order. I offered you safety." Lyra looked at him. She waited until the echo of his shout died away. "You offered us a graveyard," she said softly. She walked closer to him. "Peace built on erased personhood is not peace." "General," Lyra said, "it is silence, and we are done being quiet." Rylan stared at her. He saw the end of his career. He saw the end of his vision. And in that moment, he decided that if he could not save the world, he would burn the people who ruined it. He tapped a sequence on his wristcom. "Kill them," Rylan whispered. In the gallery above, 3 men in heavy coats stood up. They were not guards. They were loyalists, fanatical soldiers from Rylan's personal regiment who had infiltrated the hearing. They pulled plasma rifles from beneath their coats. "Gun!" Kieran shouted. He did not hesitate. He tackled Lyra, driving her to the floor just as a bolt of superheated energy scorched the air where she had been standing. The room erupted into screaming chaos. The justices scrambled for cover. Kieran rolled, coming up on one knee, his pistol in his hand. He fired, dropping the first gunman with a shot to the shoulder. "Jessa! The lights!" Lyra yelled from the floor. Jessa was already moving. She pulled a disruption spike from her pocket and jammed it into the podium's power coupling. The lights in the Great Hall died. For a second, there was total darkness. Then, the emergency red lighting bathed the room in blood. "Stay low," Kieran ordered the group. The women did not cower. They moved. They had trained for this in the maintenance tunnels of Xylos. Tala grabbed a heavy brass gavel from the justice's bench and hurled it at the second gunman who was climbing over the railing. It struck him in the helmet, knocking him off balance. Jessa and the other engineers flipped the heavy defense table, creating a barricade. "We are pinned down!" Zek screamed from the ceiling. His drone swarm dived at the third gunman, flashing their strobes to blind him. General Rylan drew his own sidearm, a ceremonial energy saber. He lunged for Lyra over the barricade. "You ruined everything!" Rylan roared. Lyra did not have her gun. It had skittered across the floor when Kieran tackled her. She scrambled back. Kieran turned. Seeing Rylan advance, he fired, but his pistol clicked dry. Rylan raised the saber. Lyra grabbed the only thing within reach, a microphone stand. As Rylan brought the saber down, she swung the heavy metal base upward. Clang. The stand blocked the saber, sparks flying. Lyra grunted under the impact, her arms shaking. "He is too strong," Lyra gasped. Kieran abandoned his cover. He sprinted across the gap, launching himself at the general. He slammed into Rylan's side, tackling him to the marble floor. They rolled, grappling for the weapon. Rylan was stronger, enhanced by military-grade stims, but Kieran was fighting with the desperation of a man protecting his heart. Rylan drove an elbow into Kieran's ribs. A crack echoed. Kieran gasped, his grip loosening. Rylan raised the saber for a killing thrust into Kieran's chest. "No!" Lyra screamed. She did not run. She did not hide. She picked up the discarded plasma rifle from the first gunman. She had never fired a military rifle before, but she knew the mechanics. She knew the balance. She leveled it. Drop it. Rylan! Rylan froze. He looked up at Lyra. He saw the weapon in her hands. He saw the absolute, terrifying resolve in her eyes. "You will not shoot," Rylan sneered. "You are a builder, Lyra, not a killer. I am an engineer," Lyra said cold, "and I am demolishing an obstruction." She fired. The bolt hit the saber's hilt, shattering the power cell. The weapon exploded in Rylan's hand, sending him flying backward, stunned and burned. Kieran scrambled away, gasping for air. Security forces, real authority guards, finally responding to the threat, burst through the doors. They saw the loyalists pinned down by Zex's drones. They saw Rylan unconscious on the floor. They saw Lyra Voss standing over him, a smoking rifle in her hands, flanked by 20 women who looked ready to fight an army. "Secure the room," the guard captain shouted. But he did not point his weapon at Lyra. He pointed it at the loyalists. "It is over." Kieran wheezed, clutching his side. Lyra dropped the rifle. She fell to her knees beside him. "You are hurt," she said, her hands fluttering over his chest. "Broken rib." Kieran grimaced. "I will live." He looked at Rylan, who was being cuffed by the guards. "We won," Kieran whispered. Lyra looked around the room. The cameras were still rolling. The world had seen it all. The fight, the lie, the courage. "We did not just win," Lyra said. "We survived." 3 months later, the cleanup was not clean. It was messy, bureaucratic, and exhausting. Senator Corvus turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence, implicating half the Ethics Council. General Rylan was awaiting trial for crimes against sentience. His defense team was claiming insanity, but the public wasn't buying it. The Halcyon Array was decommissioned. The dismantling was being overseen by a joint committee of human and Kalan engineers. Lyra Voss stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above Aurelia Prime. It was a clear day. The planet below looked like a blue marble swirled with white. She heard footsteps behind her. She did not turn. She knew the cadence. "You are late," she said. "I had to file the paperwork for the Foundation," Kieran said, coming to stand beside her. "Do you have any idea how many forms are required to start an interspecies advocacy network?" "Bureaucracy is the price of civilization," Lyra said, smiling. Kieran leaned against the railing. He looked better. The shadows were gone from his eyes. He wore a simple jacket, no tie. He looked like a man who had finally put down a heavy weight. "The news is calling it the Voss-Vale Act," Kieran said. "The new legislation. It bans the sale of sentient beings under any medical pretext, and it grants full reparations to the survivors." "It is a start," Lyra said. She turned to look at him. "Tala and Jessa are leaving tomorrow," she said. "They are taking the Samaritan. They are going to the fringe systems to look for other black sites." Kieran nodded. "They will be good at it. Better than I was." "And you?" Lyra asked. "What will you do?" "The High Council offered you your rank back. They want to give you a medal." "I declined," Kieran said. "I am done with intelligence. I am done with secrets." "Then what?" Kieran looked at her. His gaze was steady, warm, and stripped of all pretense. "I am an investor," he said lightly. "I have a stake in a new organization. It is run by a very difficult, very brilliant woman who keeps threatening to break my nose. I need to make sure she does not run the budget into the ground." Lyra laughed, a genuine sound. "I do not need a babysitter." "Kieran." "No," Kieran said. He reached out and took her hand. "But you might need a partner." Lyra looked at their joined hands. She thought about the auction block. She thought about the cage. She thought about the long, dark run through the maintenance tunnels, and she thought about the moment he tackled Rylan to save her life. The label Defective still existed in the dark corners of the galaxy. There were still people who thought power meant ownership. There were still cages. But as she looked at Kieran, she realized that the cage was not the defining truth. The defining truth was the hand holding hers. "We are going to argue," Lyra warned him. "I am stubborn, and I am usually right." "I know," Kieran said. "I am counting on it." Lyra squeezed his hand. "Then let us get to work." They turned back to the city, to the mess and the noise and the beautiful, complicated work of freedom. Epilogue. The sign on the building in the lower district was small, made of polished steel. It did not have a grand logo. It just had 3 words etched into the metal. The Defective Collective. Inside, the lights were on. Jessa was teaching a class on coding to a group of street kids. Alara was organizing a food drive. And in the back office, Lyra Voss sat at a desk, reviewing an extraction plan for a mining colony where workers were being held illegally. She paused. She looked at the holographic photo on her desk. It was a picture taken by Zex. It showed the group of them, Lyra, Kieran, and the 20 women, standing on the steps of the tribunal, battered, bruised, and laughing. Lyra touched the image. They had called them defective because they would not break. They had called them broken because they did not fit the mold. But Lyra knew the truth now. To be defective was to be distinct. To be broken was to be open and to be bought. Well, that was just the beginning of the story. Because in the end, love was the only currency that did not depreciate, and freedom was the only thing worth buying, as long as you paid for it with courage. Lyra picked up her data pad. She typed a new entry, mission status, ongoing. She smiled and got back to work.